All right, in this session, let's talk about overcoming objections. This is something that you'll need to do throughout the sales process, but predominantly it rears its head when you're attempting to close. And there are objections that customers may have with moving forward and completing the sales transaction at a particular time. Let's talk about and remind ourselves, what is the number one reason that people do not buy? The number one reason that people do not buy is fear of making a mistake. And so throughout the sales process earlier on, you should have been spending time engaging in selling yourself, selling your brand, your company that stands behind the product, and then also selling the product or service. And remember, what we discussed before is that people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. So we can spend a great deal of time talking about overcoming objections, but if you fail to get a person to know, like, or trust you, overcoming objections won't work. You're going to have more objections. If you fail in your responsibility to sell yourself, to sell the company, and to sell the product, to build value that exceeds the price in the mind of the customer, then overcoming objections is sort of premature. You should get back to fundamental sales training and figure out how you can build value throughout a solid sales process. So before we proceed any further, I just want you to wrap your head around that. If you're getting lots of objections at the end of your sales process, then maybe you can glean some assistance from the concepts we discuss in this video. But I would spend time going back into my sales process and ask yourself whether or not you're really building value, because you shouldn't be getting that many objections. If you have a quality product and service to sell, and you do a really good job of building the value in the minds of the customers who need the product. And remember, we don't want to sell to people who don't need or want the product. We're not trying to trick people into anything. We only want to match prospective customers with a good product or service that will solve a problem, that will fill a need in their lives. So ask yourself first, am I getting an inordinate amount of objections? And if so, maybe it's not about learning how to overcome objections, but in fact, learning to build more value in my product through a more thorough sales process. Of course, anytime you learn to overcome objections correctly, you're going to have a better chance of closing the deal anyway. So you should perpetually be refining your sales process, and you can work on overcoming objections as part of that. So let's proceed with the concept of overcoming objections. Of course, the audience for this video is selling a variety of items. It can be anything from, food to cars to homes to clothing to software, anything. And so we won't be dealing with a specific objection today. And as you'll find out as we proceed with this training, specific objections don't matter much. You're going to have to find out the answer to specific technical data and everything that people might object to. Like if they say, well, that particular computer processor is not powerful enough for my needs, therefore I don't want to buy it. That kind of objection, which is specific to someone selling a particular computer product, you'll have to, in your industry, discover, how can you deal with, what do we do in that situation? But what you can get out of this video is, how do I get to the point where I can now share that information with them and it matters? So let's look first at what kind of objections are there. There are really maybe 4 or 5 different categories of objections. The first one we'd say is a product objection. The person is objecting to the product itself. Maybe it doesn't have the features they're looking for. Maybe they're questioning the quality of it. A competitive product is more appealing to them. And so that's one form of objection. Another form of objection would be, say, pricing, a financial objection, the budget, and that can manifest in any number of specifics, such as the person can't afford right now upfront. They might need some financing. It may be that the interest rates on your terms of your financing or your leasing terms or whatever you're offering them may be uncompetitive or unacceptable in their mind. It may be that the monthly payment, even when you do work out payments for them, that needs to be restructured. At the end of the day, what we're talking about is that the customer is objecting on the basis that it's unaffordable. And so there's plenty of ways to look at restructuring things. Aside from simply dropping the price, there may be other ways that you can make it more affordable for them. So we've got product and we've got financial objection. Another form of objection would be timing. And that's really critical for all of us when we're making a purchase, is considering, is now the right time for this? And varying personalities will spend different amounts of time researching a product. So somebody may be researching a product with genuine interest, and they're sincerely prepared to move forward at some point, just not today. And it might be next week. They might need to do a little bit more research on some of your competition, some of the alternative products or services. Or it may be that they're researching things a year in advance and they just don't have a need. Maybe it's a product like appliances for a new home they're building that they don't even break ground for several months. And so the appliances they may not need for the better part of a year, but they have the time now and they're interested now and they're excited now. So you can do a great sales process. And the objection you might run into is that the timing's not right. They're not moving forward today. That doesn't mean that they'll never move forward. So to recap, we've got a product objection, financial or budgetary objection. We have a timing objection. The fourth kind of objection, I would say, is a personality objection. And if you think back to the various things we said that you need to sell yourself first and foremost. And people only buy from those that they know, like, and trust. If you did a poor job or you were just negligent in spending the time trying to sell yourself, you have a slim chance, especially in bigger ticket items, you have a slim chance of, I say bigger ticket items, but I think about it, actually even a pair of shoes. You know, if you don't like the salesperson you're dealing with, if somebody turns you off, rubs you the wrong way, maybe they come across as arrogant, apathetic, or whatever it is that turns you off. It could be that they have bad breath, they got funky breath, and you don't want to deal with them. That can be all it takes to kill the sale. So the personality objection is the most difficult one, because once a person has decided they don't want to deal with you, it's very difficult to overcome that. The best advice I have for you in the case of a personality objection is to turn the lead over to another sales representative, maybe somebody that you work with and you collaborate with, your manager, somebody else, the owner of the company, somebody, a fresh face who can try to start from scratch, because it may very well be that the customer is very happy with the product. The timing is going to work out well for them. They're happy with the price. They just don't like you, and they don't want to deal with you. They don't want to, in the event of something down the road occurs that they have to follow up with the company for warranty or whatever, they don't want to deal with you. So the best thing to do in those situations is turn the customer over to somebody else. And then there's the concept of a non-objection, or I would say the hidden objection. The objection behind the objection. Sometimes you'll get objections that aren't really, and I bring this up because in the personality objection, usually they're not going to say it's you. Okay, so they'll give you the non-objection. So you ask for the clothes. Okay, so it sounds like that one fits into your budget. We've got the color you want. Would you like to proceed with that one right now? And the customer says, I want to think about it. I want to think about it is not a real objection. That is the surface objection. There is an objection behind that objection. They have a real hidden objection And it could be personality. I don't like you, but they're not going to say, oh, I'd love to buy that product, but I don't like you, so I'm not going to. People tend to not say those kinds of things. And so it's very imperative for a skilled sales professional to be able to identify when you're not getting a real objection. And things like, I want to think about it, which are very common to hear, are just a way of a consumer saying to you, I don't want to discuss with you why I'm not proceeding. So there's ways of uncovering the real objection. We'll talk about that a little bit. Another thing might be, well, I just want to talk to my wife about this, or I want to talk to my partner, whatever. That's could be very valid, but often is masking a true objection. And also, if you did your needs discovery correctly, again, this comes back to doing a good, thorough sales process. You should have known that, who the decision maker was prior to engaging. Now, if you are selling very inexpensive items and you have a very quick sales process, then that's not a big deal. So a lot of the people watching this are selling higher ticket items, and you should have engaged in a good, thorough needs discovery in which you uncovered who the decision makers were up front, so that you could ideally present to all the decision makers at once. That's not always possible, but that's sort of a best practice. If you can establish up front who the decision makers are, and if you realize you're not dealing with the decision maker, I wouldn't invest a huge amount of time in the sales process at that time. Instead, I would build a relationship with the person that I'm speaking with, and I would attempt to book another appointment where I can deal with both decision makers or the group. Maybe it's a board of directors that's making a purchase decision, a management team, something like that. So those are the things for sort of categorizing objections. Okay, so as always, I hope you have a pen and paper handy, jot some things down, pause the video, rewind the video, make notes on the category if you haven't already written down what the categories of objections are. And now let's get into how do we actually overcome an objection. This is so critical. This is, if you only take one thing away from the video, remember this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. In his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Dr. Stephen Covey puts it another way. Seek first to understand and then be understood. That's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. So if you want to be a highly effective salesperson, seek first to understand your customer and then be understood. An ineffective salesperson will want to show up and throw up. He'll want to give you all the information and then expect you to make a decision without understanding where you're coming from as a customer. That is a plan to fail. So with this in mind, the most important part of overcoming an objection is what I refer to as the understanding response. And so it doesn't matter. You can give me any example of an objection, and before I even address the actual details, so it might be a product objection. I don't think the quality is very good. Or it might be that pricing objection. I simply can't afford your monthly payment that you said this is going to cost me. Before you get into the response to the specific objection, you have to have an understanding response. And it should be genuine. I'm not telling you to make this stuff up or feign empathy for the customer, because you've been there too. You've had a situation when you're looking at purchasing something and you have reservations regarding the quality, or regarding the timing, or you have reservations regarding the financial aspects of the transaction. And so since you can appreciate that, since you can put yourself in the customer's shoes, at this point, this is the primary part of overcoming objections, is express that empathy. Tell the customer, break the ice or lower the stress by giving an understanding response. I can totally appreciate where you're coming from. this is a significant investment. I understand that, you know, you work hard for your money and you want to make sure that you invest in something of good value. So what I just did there was I diffused the situation of the objection without coming back right away with, well, no, this is the best price we can do, or you're not going to find a better price anywhere out there, or, you know, the timing objection, or whatever else, the quality. No, you're wrong, Mr. Customer. You know, of course, you're not going to say those types of things, but even if you are pretty skilled in addressing and you have some contrary information to share with the customer, the understanding response is critical. It's the first thing you need to do to be effective at overcoming objections, because they're not going to listen. Remember, people don't care how much you know. Oh, the quality of this is 11 gauge steel. My competitor is offering 14 gauge steel, which is inferior, by the way. Well, it's inferior in terms of its strength. It may be superior in terms of its weight, if that's a, but you get my point, is that they don't want to hear all the technical aspects of why your quality's there or whatever until they understand that you understand. That is going to help to build that trust where you're putting yourself in their shoes. They understand that, or they start to accept that you know where they're coming from and you can relate. Once that happens, it triggers something. It flips a switch in the brain where now they listen to you. So an understanding response, again, something like, you know what? I completely understand. I know where you're coming from. I've been in those shoes myself. And if you really feel that way, would you mind if I shared something with you that might help you with that? See how I express my empathy for the situation they're in, and then I sort of ask permission to share some new information that might be of interest to them and address the concern. And then I would actually wait for a response. I wouldn't just start talking with the gauge of the steel or the features. Well, this one has the feature A, B, C, and D on it, and the competition doesn't. That's why ours costs more money or whatever. Before you get into that, you want to address the understanding response. Another way that this has been referred to is what's known as the technique pace-pace-lead. And the reason it's pace-pace-lead is the pace and the pace are the understanding response components. And the lead is where you actually give the technical details to overcome the objection. You actually address the objection specifically. And when you're doing the pace-pace-lead technique, you want to use terms like, I understand, I totally agree with you, I understand where you're coming from, and you use terms like and. So the first pace, I understand where you're coming from, and I totally agree with you. I can appreciate. These types of terms are good for pacing. And it's okay to go pace, pace, pace lead. I mean, you don't want to spend an hour telling them how much you agree with them. And then they'll say, okay, thank you very much, see you later. You do have to get to the lead, and you do have to get to the specifics and share the information that might change their mind on the objection that they had. But you start with, and interesting that I just said but, because the next thing I wanted to tell you is don't use but. To transition from the pace to the lead, you don't use the term but, you use the term and. I totally understand where you're coming from, and I can appreciate that you work hard for your money. And I also know that value is what our customers like most in our product. If you don't mind, I'll share something with you that a lot of people don't realize. And I should have maybe mentioned this earlier. Now I can go into it. See how I use the word and. Totally appreciate where you're coming from. I can appreciate that you are, and I understand you work hard for your money. And I also know, not but, our customers have found that our quality is the best. You don't use the term but. Think of the term but as erasing everything that you said before that. I totally understand where you're coming from. I can appreciate you work hard for your money. This is a big decision. But that's like saying, I don't understand. You're erasing everything. And think about it when you communicate with people face to face on any matter, a friend, a spouse, whatever. When you say but, when you're agreeing with somebody, it sort of undermines the agreement. So we are in sales wordsmiths, okay? So your words do matter. So try to use the "and I also know" is another means of communicating a contrary position. It's sort of, in addition to my empathy, I also know that there's other information that might help you feel slightly differently, not but. The technique of the pace lead is also founded, I believe, in something that Dr. Stephen Covey covers, and that's the concept of an emotional bank account. And so when you if you request something of somebody, think of that as a withdrawal you're trying to make in your relationship with them, in the emotional bank account that you've built up. If you have not deposited anything into that bank account, into that emotional bank account, you can't withdraw. You'll be overdrawn and you'll get you'll get nowhere. And that's, again, in all relationships. So what we need to do, whether we're talking about a friend, a family member, spouse, or a customer, is we need to invest in our relationship in order to make a withdrawal, which is a request from somebody. So throughout the sales process, you should be spending your time selling yourself where they really like you, and you've made a lot of emotional deposits before you get to the close, when you're going to be trying to withdraw, so to speak. One time I was given a position in sales management, and the person hiring me had called my previous employer, and my previous employer reported that I was an incredible closer. He closes deals like nobody. And the new prospective employer actually shared that with me and said, "This is going to be great. You can go in and speak with all of our customers and you can close." And I never thought of myself as a great closer, and I sort of, I don't remember if I actually corrected him on the spot over time, but the notion that was going through my mind was, I don't think of myself as a great closer. I don't have all the best words to say and everything. The reason I'm so successful at closing the deal has to do with everything that precedes the close. It's all the emotional deposits I make with my customers up until the point of the close. And so I get fewer objections. And when I do have to overcome an objection, those emotional deposits allow me to make withdrawals, and they are listening. They know that I care about them, and therefore they care about what I know. So think about that concept and try to think in the pace lead of each time you make a pace, you're actually depositing a little bit before you do a lead and you try to withdraw. So I completely understand what you're saying. This is a major investment. If I was in your shoes, I'd be thinking the same thing. Those are a couple paces. And I also know that I probably should have mentioned this thing that most of our customers have discovered. Do you mind if I share this extra information with you? Now I go for the lead, and perhaps that was all I needed, was a little bit more of a deposit. And this concept actually is very effective. And it's not just effective in sales. I got to emphasize this, because you want to be practicing these techniques. They're not just techniques to try to manipulate. The art of influence is very useful in all human interactions. And we don't want to be confrontational with customers. Of course, we don't want to be confrontational with anyone. Even if you're, trying to talk somebody at the ticket, what am I trying to say? At the gate for upgrading you or allowing you on the plane with a little oversized luggage or whatever it is, using these techniques where a person feels comfortable with you, they know, like, and trust you, it's going to work. You're going to get further with them. The next point I'd like to make is that you should try to anticipate objections again before they occur. And if you can anticipate an objection, perhaps further upstream in the sales process, the person was giving you clues that they're really sensitive about their budget, then you want to spend some time addressing those things before it's an objection. And so if something comes out near right when you're about to ask for the close, and it's just a clue, or you realize that there's something that they're most likely going to object to, preemptively, proactively address that before they bring it up. Then the pace lead technique, which is effective, but it's not really necessary if you spend the time, because it's not contrarian. Overcoming objections is a little confrontational. That's why we want to really carefully choose our words so as not to get someone's back up, to get them in a defensive posture. Instead, what we want to do is keep it so that it's a consultative relationship communication. And when I preemptively overcome an objection by bringing it up before the customer does, I can do that. I can put it in a third party, which makes it not about them. You're not accusing them of not being able to afford something, or you're not accusing them of having wasted your time, or whatever can pop into people's minds. There's a great deal of psychology in sales. And so a lot of these things are all about keeping the emotions where it's on a friendly term all along. So you might think of something like, I really think this is going to, I don't know that I did a well enough job of overcoming their concerns about the affordability of our product. And so you could say something like, now, a lot of our customers in the beginning are really concerned about the price, because it's no small investment. And I want to let you know that that's completely normal. And so our company, what we've done is we've come up with blah, 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 blah. So what I was about to do is go into overcoming the objection. But you notice I didn't have to pace as much. I didn't have to spend as much time, because I was talking in a third person. A lot of our customers, what I've encountered with many people is they ask blah, blah, blah. It's another way to say it. It's like, some of my customers ask me this. You might think the customer wants to ask it, but they don't want to look foolish. They're afraid that in some way it shines in a bad light. It's just the human interaction that we're always so afraid of what we look like or how we appear. We don't want to appear that we wasted somebody's time, or that we can't afford the product or whatever, so we don't ask certain questions. How many times have you been afraid to ask the price because of that whole thing, like, if you have to ask, you can't afford it, never buy from somebody who has that attitude. And people are afraid of bringing something up because of how you might view them. And so you can say, a lot of customers ask me, and you can bring an objection up. And then you can spend some time in a very deliberate and strategic manner of delivering the information that overcomes that objection. One of the techniques that I've used successfully in the past for bringing out objections, this really works effectively with the hidden objection, where everything seems to be going smooth. Maybe you think you're going to get a sale, but you get hit with the, I want to think about it, or you get hit with the, I want to talk to my partner, whatever. And you're like, there's probably something else there. You give the understanding response, completely understand where you're coming from. It's an important decision, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with whatever you decide to do. And I am also married, or I have a partner, or I have a business partner that I would want to give the respect to, of making sure that I discuss this decision with before I proceeded as well. So I know where you're coming from. Again, the understanding response. Then use this technique, the scale of 1 to 10. But if it was, say, just up to you, I use the word but. Maybe in this instance, it's okay. Well, you'll find yourself often, like kind of slapping your wrist mentally when you use the term but at these critical moments. Can I ask you a question? If it were completely up to you, do you think you would proceed? Would you recommend this product to your spouse, or what, like in the example of them using the objection to speak with somebody else, and see what they say, and ask on a scale of 1 to 10. If they say, yeah, I think I would, but they're more likely to say, I want to chew on it a little bit, but it sounds pretty good. and they're being a little bit ambiguous, a little bit vague for you. So then you get it specific by saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is I gotta have it, let's go right now, and 1 is no, I'm not interested at all. Where would you say you fall? And it doesn't really matter what the answer. You're hoping that it's a 9, you're hoping it's high on the scale, but they might answer 3, and that should be an indication to you that either the product's not a good fit for them, or your sales process has a lot of work to do in building value, something like that. But it's still okay, because at this point what you say is, all right, fair enough, a 6. Let me ask you, what would it take to get it from a 6 to a 10? That's the technique to get the hidden objection out. Well, if you could do it for half price, all of a sudden they go right to the pricing objection. It's like, well, or if they said, well, you'd have to upgrade the processor to blah, blah, blah. Now we've got a product objection coming out. And whatever the answer is that takes it from a 5, 6, 7 on the scale to a 10 is the real objection, the hidden objection. And that's where you need to spend some time building more value. If it's under 5, in other words, they're not really even on the fence about it, then you might want to double check whether you think your product selection was correct and ask them, do you think maybe we should have looked at something different? Instead of model A, we should have looked at model B. Would you like to consider? Because often, again, the customer is thinking, yeah, I know I asked about this. And that's a mistake that a lot of salespeople make, is they right away, they skim through, they go right through, quickly through a needs discovery, because the customer comes in and he says he knows what he wants to see based on maybe some online research he did. And we show that to him, and we spend all our time trying to sell that product. But a sales professional, an expert, spend some time to say, oh, you compliment the customer. That's a great product. You obviously have done some of your homework there, done some online research, have you? Or how did you hear about that one? And then you can ask the customer, by the way, there are a couple of other products that are very similar, and many customers are considering between 2 or 3 of these things that we offer. Can I ask you why you decided that would be the best one for you? So early on in the sales process, this isn't about overcoming the objection at this point. This is trying to avoid running into objections that you should not have done by skimming over parts of the sales process, a good needs discovery. But if in that scale of 1 to 10 exercise or that technique, if they're answering a 3 or a 2, it's a good bet that you showed them the wrong product. And maybe you want to bring that up, because the customer may be thinking in his mind, I know I asked about that one. I'm going to go and check out with the competition something that's much different price range, or I'm going to go and check out something that the delivery time is available tomorrow instead of 3 months from now. By the way, when I was talking about the timing objection, I used it like the customer might want to be delaying his decision, but another form of timing objection is that the amount of time it takes you to deliver on the product is unacceptable, because they have a need to have the time be much sooner. They're more urgently in need of the product than you can deliver it. So it cuts both ways in terms of the timing objection. Anyway, the point I was making is that when they're answering very low on that scale of 1 to 10, and you're considering that probably you showed them the wrong product, they may be in their mind planning to go right next. Their next thing they're going to do is research another product. So take the time. Maybe you've invested and they quite like you. They think the product, for whatever reason, or the service is not going to work for them, and something else that you do have to offer may very well work for them. So don't give up at that point. Explore whether another option you have is going to work for them. So those are the main things about overcoming objections I think you can work on for now. Ask questions in the comments. Go back and review the whole sales process and figure out how can you refine it in each phase of the sales process in order to decrease the number of objections, and then measure that. It's really critical in sales to measure your conversions from each phase. If you were, not able to get to a demonstration phase within a sales process and people were bouncing, so to speak, or exiting the sales process before you get there, you want to look at your transition. You want to look at what's happening to get them up to that sales process and refine. Always refine along the ways. When it comes to overcoming objections, what is your number one takeaway? Understanding response. It does not matter. I just will add this. I've heard it asserted that without actually giving any response whatsoever to the objection, like maybe it's pricing and you don't even address the pricing at all, the understanding response in and of itself may be enough to overcome the objection. And you think about that in a non-commerce relationship. And oftentimes people might be venting to you about a frustration or whatever, and they just want you to listen. And when you do listen, you go, I completely appreciate that. Oh, it's got to be frustrating. That may be enough where it takes them down to, and they go, you know what? And now back to the commerce as an example. You only live once, let's go for it. I'm going to treat myself or whatever. So your major takeaway from this is that it is the emotional bank account. The people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You've got to give an understanding response before you give any details for overcoming a specific objection. And always remember, people buy from those they know, like, and trust. Lastly, you have to sell yourself. You have to sell your brand or your company. You have to sell the product or service. All right, thanks for joining me today. Let's keep going. Perpetual refinement.